Schools will be reopening in Mumbai from pre-primary all the way to 12th standard from Monday, the 24th of January. Now, the guidelines that have been issued for the city say that parents will have to give a written consent and there will be no compulsion for students to go to school in physical form. There will always be options of online as well as offline school also being given to parents. Now, this is an important step because in a sense, it marks the end of a prolonged period of virtual learning for children not only in Mumbai but in many parts of the country. Right now, each state is on a different timeline, with some having put children back in online schooling only recently and others coming out of it gradually. Hopefully, in the next few months, we will see a more larger group of children, of students going back to physical learning like before the pandemic. Now, this will not be without its challenges. What will this entail? How will schools, parents and students prepare for this new reality once more? To speak on some of these issues, I'm joined today by Dr. Geoffrey Fisher. He is head of school at BD Somani International School in Mumbai. Dr. Zirak Marker, child and adolescent psychiatrist with Mpower, is joining us on the show. And I'm also speaking today with Dr. Balasubramanian. He's medical director at the Kanchi Kamakoti Child's Trust Hospital in Chennai. Welcome to all of you and thank you so much for speaking with us. Dr. Fisher, let me get your perspective first. How would your school prepare for welcoming back learners after quite a long hiatus?
Well, we've been working pretty hard on this, so we think we're relatively well prepared. We are so delighted to have students coming back because we are acutely aware that there is a cost being paid by the students in terms of their own learning, particularly their social learning, and that cost at least appears to be higher the younger that you are. Some of these poor kids have taken 8-year-old and spent a quarter of their life in distance learning mode. It's a big cost that they're paying. We, of course, are having to conform with the BMC S.O.Ps, and in doing so, we think that we can bring safely half of our students on any week. So we're doing grades on, grades off each week and trying to make sure that we are focusing on providing a really rich learning environment to try and bring these kids back to a sense of joy in learning. And that, of course, involves all the physical and other aspects, the artistic, the dramatic types of learning that would otherwise go on. We are acutely aware that we have to provide a safe environment, and that needs to be both emotionally safe, emotionally welcoming, as well as physically safe. And so we have many protocols about how that might work. But primarily, I think our focus is to bring a sense of joy and happiness back into education. Thank you.
Yeah. Just a follow-up question there, Dr. Fisher. A part of the guidelines talk about, and I suspect this will be the case all over the country because authorities will not want to force parents to send their kids back to school if they aren't safe. But part of the guidelines are to provide both offline and online mode of learning. Now, practically, how challenging is this? Would this entail a teacher, for example, teaching the lesson twice in both modes? How would it practically work?
I think it is a challenge, for sure. What we're doing is, if there are students not coming to school, we're streaming the lesson. Rather than teaching a separate lesson, we're teaching the lesson to both face-to-face students and to those at a distance. It does mean that those who are choosing not to come to school or who are unable because they're COVID positive or whatever, have to change the way because they're not having a direct link with the teacher as they have had in distance learning. They're having to observe the lesson as a member of the audience, if you like, and then make sure that their questions and their interaction with the lesson is done effectively. It does mean that there will be less involved in group work and practical work and all of those types of education, but it is possible. we are lucky in that we have a large number of teachers and a very high very low student teacher ratio. So particularly in the primary, we will have one teacher focusing on the online environment and another teacher focusing on the face-to-face environment. In the secondary, it will be streamed lessons.
Right. And, we have to contextualize this because a lot of classrooms across the country sometimes have a student population of up to 40, 50, even up to 80 students to a classroom. So we'll have to figure out how that works. That aside, I want to come to you, Dr. Zirak, on how crucial this has been and what will be the challenges for children now to adapt after such a long time and go back to physical schooling. How do you take that step by step?
So I look at it as a three-part model. I think we have to work, on teachers, the student body, of course, and the parents. You can't work with either in silo. And I think parents are equally, stressed and anxious about this whole rapid change back to normal life. And, rightfully so, right? I mean, we don't have perfect answers and there are no real perfect pros and cons. But as Dr. Fisher said, we ought to come back now. It's been 2 years. So it's been a really challenging time for students. And I think we're looking at different problems at different age groups. I think for the younger kids up to, their adolescent age, we're looking at a lot of children who are going to struggle with independence, autonomy, and individualized work. I think they're so used to being on a virtual platform and, parents sitting beside them and prompting them. And, we have a whole battery of incidences where parents have even been giving answers and all sorts of funny things. I think all of us running schools have had those anecdotes. But on a serious note, it is going to be really challenging because suddenly they're going to be coming back with a sensory overload. Now, when I use the word sensory overload, there's suddenly going to be auditory, visual, and tactile overloads. As you said, classrooms of 30, 40 kids in one go, so many more distractions. So we're looking actually at even assessing lost skills and learning lags. Because, research have also indicated there's a high trend and incidence now with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Reading and writing lags have become huge along the way as we are assessing kids and even new kids who are coming in for admissions. And I think the parents also have to really learn how to wean down the support. So systemic desensitization is very, very important. So still holding on to a hybrid model and weaning the whole process in gently with a huge emphasis on mental health. And I think that's something we all have to collaborate on, whether it's, again, the parent body or student body. Schools have to take cognizance of mental health because, WHO itself has suggested that the next pandemic, if not already, is a mental health crisis, right? And there are going to be lots of kids battling anxiety and depression-based symptoms and stress-related symptoms and fatigue and burnout and screen addiction that they're all still grappling with that we all have to deal with. And I think schools need to take cognizance of that. And I truly believe strongly, like we have done already with many schools in our city and country, is creating a mental health curriculum, which we already have actually through Mpower, and incorporating them in schools and collaborating that with parents as well. Because we have to use a holistic approach and, yes, keeping in mind completely prioritizing the emotional and social well-being of each individual child.
No, so the learning loss is a very real issue. There have been studies showing how impactful that learning loss has been for students across categories and how it will really hit us going forward. But I want to look at this medically as well, because even today, Dr. Balasubramanian, parents will have to give written consent to whether they want their children to go in or not. And there are a significant number of parents who are still worried about letting their children go to school, believing that this will cause them to get infected, probably with COVID-19. Children below the age of 15 currently are not, not have access to vaccines. It might go up from 12 years onwards shortly, but then children below 12 will not have access to vaccines, and those fears persist. What can you tell us about how safe it is to go back to school for children?
It's very unfortunate that we are going through a crisis which is affecting a whole generation of young children. In fact, the UNICEF has come out with a statement that the worst impact due to COVID is going to be on children and going to be on interrupted learning. For the last 2 years, the children are suffering from lack of psychological, physical stimulation in the school, and they are being deprived of normalcy in life. The whole world is talking about return to near normalcy. It is time to concentrate on how to get back our young children to the new normalcy. When the UNICEF says that nearly 1.5 million schools have been closed for nearly 2 years, and I believe there are 247 million children who have been deprived of normal schooling due to COVID. From the parents' perspective, in fact, I have seen, as a pediatrician, I have seen parents, I have come across parents coming and begging me, "Doctor, why didn't you do something to reopen the schools? We are fed up." What is the impact that is happening because there are no schools? Most important, the effect on their mental health. They are becoming addicts to the mobile phones and TVs, unfortunately. And they have to necessarily glue themselves to the microphone for learning purposes. And the parents, particularly working mothers, can't focus on what the child is doing, whether it is attending to the lecture which is going on or doing something else. It's very difficult for them. Second, these children, I have seen mothers coming and telling me, every hour I'm asked to prepare some new food. They become obese, no exercise, even in normal school, there's very little exercise these days, very little exercise. And there is no psychological support to these children who have all been sitting in their homes glued to screens. At the same time, the parents are unnecessarily worried about their children getting COVID. Mind you, pediatric COVID is by and large a mild illness. Even with the third wave, we have not seen disaster happening in India when compared to the developed countries like United States. We have not seen lots and lots of COVID deaths in children at all. COVID is going to be a mild illness, and children are not going to escape from this virus. They are going to get it. The second worry the parents have, children, are they super spreaders to adults? There is enough data in literature, published data from the Western countries. Unfortunately, in India, it's lacking. This data which has supported the view that by simply reopening schools, we are not going to put more children at risk. Of course, pediatric vaccination is important. 15 to 18 years vaccination started. Very soon, I'm confident it will be 12 to 15, and then 5 to 12, and then even below 5 years over the next year or a few months. But before that happens, I don't think we can keep the schools closed forever. We have to start it, and we have to, in fact, there is some data from the government portal saying that nearly 90 to 92% of school personnel in India have been vaccinated. So where is the fear? There's no need to be irrational in thinking that by reopening schools, we are going to put elderly at more risk. And children are not going to escape, but they are going to suffer severely if we continue to keep the schools closed. Of course, keeping restrictions in mind, we have to find out a good system where there's going to be a hybrid system of both e-learning, which has got its own advantages and disadvantages, and also the physical classrooms with the exercises and all other avenues for interaction with other children and adults. It's time we go back to physical schooling at the earliest so that the next generation is not going to suffer permanently due to the interruption, which I call it as interrupted learning. Thank you.
Yes. So it's going to begin right from next week, possibly in Mumbai as well. I just want to come to the practical elements of it on how schools will prepare and how parents and students will grapple. And one of the questions is about administering regular rapid antigen tests. Let me come to you, Dr. Fisher, for your thoughts on this, because this is something which is happening in the United States in schools, where children and staff coming into schools, teachers, etc., are all administered regular RATs, which will help determine that those who are in school are largely COVID-free. Is that practical in the Indian context? Is that something that you would consider?
I don't think it's practical in an American context, to be honest with you. Just the sheer volume of administration. What we do is we ask the parents to make sure that, as far as they're concerned, their children are healthy before they come to school. Check their temperature, make sure they don't have a fever or any of those sorts of things. We then check their temperature again when they arrive at school. So we're reasonably confident that when the students enter the school, that they are free of infection. Of course, if somebody during the school day becomes feverish or feels unwell, then we administer a test immediately. If those students prove to be positive, we isolate them and send them home. And then they fall under the government regulations of a week's isolation and testing before they come back to school. But I agree with both of the other doctors, is that we need these kids back in school. The kids need to be back in school. These students are missing out terribly. They will get COVID, for sure, but largely that will be a relatively mild experience. They will recover quickly. Kids do recover quickly from infection, and we will get them back learning in an environment where we can assist, nurture, engage, and develop the learning environment to their individual needs. At the moment, they're getting a sort of bland diet of what we can do. I think the teaching profession around the world has earned, quite rightly, accolades for the way they have switched from face-to-face learning to online learning. They've done a brilliant job. But it is clear that online learning does not provide as rich a set of experiences as being in face-to-face. These kids, for their own benefit, for our benefit, for the future of this world, we need them back in school. And as Dr. Balasubramanian has said, it is a low-risk enterprise from a COVID perspective, and it's a high-risk enterprise keeping them at home any longer. So we do test, we do take safety protocols really seriously. We do have isolation rooms and medical staff and nurses, etc., available, and a doctor on site. But we are, as you pointed out, we're a well-endowed school. Either way, I think everybody can do a temperature check, and everybody can look for the obvious markers of infection and fever. If that happens, those kids will be going home. But apart from that, we're keen to actually have the focus in the other direction, and that is keeping kids at school.
Yep. The other question is about how this will work in terms of the experience for children once they're back. So, Dr. Balasubramanian, do you think children need to be masked when they're in school? Because this has been a matter of concern, especially for younger children. Will they be able to spend the entire school day with their masks on? And I want to just contextualize this with what the United Kingdom has recently announced, where they've said masks off, we're going back to the way it was, and we're going to learn to live with COVID-19. Do you think that's the approach we need to take when looking at children going back to schools, or do you think the masks are important?
I predict that masks from the faces of not only children but also adults and physicians like me will be off in the next 6 months. I don't think masks are going to prevent the risk of infections at all. And it is impossible. In fact, I'm working in a hospital, I'm heading a hospital. We monitor the mask wearing habits of health personnel. I can tell you, most of them are not wearing it appropriately. Most of them remove it when they should not remove it. So if that is the case with regard to health personnel, even doctors, I wonder how any school can monitor how children are going to wear masks properly in any premise, leave alone school. It's going to be impossible, next to impossible, to enforce strict discipline of wearing masks. And with the high infectivity of the new variants, I very much doubt whether masks are doing anything in preventing the new variant infections. Impossible to ensure that all children above 5 years will be wearing masks in the school. It's more psychological. It's very difficult to implement. In fact, however radical my views would be, I don't think it's going to help at all. The other thing you had earlier mentioned about rapid antigen testing is an absolute waste of money doing in schools every day for everybody. It's an absolute waste of money. It doesn't mean anything. The reason is 80 to 90% of COVID infections in children are going to be asymptomatic. Are you going to test all children daily for the next 2-3 years? It's a waste of money. It's not going to help at all. And mask will help only if it is properly worn. And there is data that the so-called surgical mask is inferior to the N95 mask. It's impossible to ensure providing N95 masks to all children in Indian schools. So I don't think it is practical at all. Instead of wasting money on it, we should concentrate more on vaccination. I think we should ensure that everybody who's in contact with children is appropriately vaccinated. That's what we should do. And in the new third wave, even adults, most of them who are tested to be positive or asymptomatic, or they have mild COVID-19, which 5 years back, we would have dismissed it as flu and we do nothing about it. It's time for a change. We are in a transition period. The medical professionals are learning, scientists are learning. This virus is teaching us a lot. I am sure masks would become redundant in schools for children very soon.
Wow, that's quite a statement, and let's hope that happens and children remain safe, all of us remain safe. Dr. Marker, I would like you to give our viewers a sort of a guide of how parents should prepare their children for the next transition and themselves. You mentioned earlier that, there were instances of parents answering for children in online class and helicoptering them. in a sense. How do you move back from that as a parent, and how do you prepare your child now for the kind of sensory overload that they will face?
Sure. So you're right. I mean, I think parental awareness and parents getting to be more cognizant on these aspects is absolutely mandatory, because I truly believe as parents, we ourselves, transfer a lot of our anxiety on our kids. So normalizing this whole, going back to normal and going back to school has to be made as easy on our kids across all age groups. And for that, whether we are apprehensive or not, and I'm sure we all have. I'm a father too, and I am not sure what the best thing or the most right thing is, but we have to get our kids back to school in some way or the other. So making it fun, making it, stress-free, if they have certain doubts and questions and concerns and worries about all these things, because you're right. I mean, how do you allow or rather make 6 and 8 or 9-year-olds socially distance themselves and keep, a certain amount of distance between? Aren't they going to play? Aren't they going to be happy to see each other? We're looking at a lot of pre-teens and teens meeting each other after maybe even 2 years and hugging each other and things like that. So I think adding the fun part, right, and letting parents know that with this whole, as you rightly use the term, either the helicopter parenting or now the new term is snow plowing parenting, when parents are trying to remove all obstacles and any kind of hurdles or difficulties for their children, is the worst thing you can do for their future life skills, because kids need to learn how to fail, how to, go through discomfort sometimes, problem solve, or have consequences that they face with certain mistakes or setbacks in life, and realize that stress and ups and downs are all part of life. And I think if we believe that there's a silver lining for everything, looking at practicing gratitude on a regular daily basis with our kids, teaching them to be optimistic, looking at the good amidst all that the negativities are, and shielding them from all the stress and the unnecessary information that our kids are receiving today with regards to COVID. For example, even OCD, which is your obsessive compulsive disorder, has increased in kids because they are role modeling their parents with constant hand sanitization or constant fear and worry with psychosomatic symptoms going up, and constantly wanting to get tested themselves or hand wash repeatedly and so on and so forth. So parents need to look, as I said, we as parents and as schools have to prioritize psychological and emotional well-being as priority number one. Ensure that kids get back to a structure. I cannot tell you how many teenagers are up all night or up to 2 or 3 in the morning and then trying to struggle to get up and just, they wash their face and they're in front of the screen. Now there's going to be, more preparation time in the mornings. I mean, there's a whole, medical issues of dandruff and acne in teenagers. And like as doctor said, there are a lot of kids who reach pre kind of diabetic states because of being obese. So, looking into their health, balanced diets, structuring and balancing a routine in the day. Kids have lost out on understanding the discipline of a routine and the importance of that on their day-to-day basis. And gut health. I truly believe that physical health, mental health, gut health, and sleep, rest, and movement, physical movement. And if you put all these things together, and I think if parents take the onus that these 4 or 5 elements have to be put across in a holistic way for our kids, I think we are good to go. But there has to be discipline brought back to these aspects of the day. And like I said, we have to be joyous and enthusiastic and riddle the whole aspect with fun and this new phase back to normal. And I think that's the duty of us as parents to do.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for this great conversation. It's been most insightful, and I hope the viewers, especially the parents watching this, would have taken away something useful from it. It's back to school very soon everywhere, but from Monday in Maharashtra and in Mumbai as well. And with that, hopefully this very challenging period for Indian children will come to an end. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.